Hey everybody, p-brane here. I'm going to debunk these photos right here where ball earthers, people that believe in a spinning ball earth, say that this is showing that the sun is casting a shadow onto clouds above the mountain. But before I get started, I just want to show you this new t-shirt I have. I've done a lot of mountain shadow videos, and I just thought this one was pretty simple. And it's, not like wearing a flat earth shirt that knocks people over the head with it. And this could generate some conversation, and it's pretty cool with these little geometric design here. So anyway, I have a store shelf with the merchandise underneath the video, or there's a link in the description. And go to my store and check out the new shirts, man. I really appreciate it. And for everybody who's purchased, thank you so much. All right, let's go. Okay, I'm going to show you that through the use of time lapse of mountain shadows, we see that the shadow is always cast downward. The first shadow of the day and the last shadow of the day are cast downward. There is no casting upward. The geometry to a direct line to the sun does not allow it. The sun is always above the mountain and always above the clouds. So what we see with these pics, it's either a reflection or it's most of the time it would be perspective, and that the shadow is always cast on top of the clouds. Okay, and I'm going to do it through the magic of time lapse. Remember my time lapse of the sun video, I showed how the sun is always cruising over the earth, and that's something you would never see except through time lapse, because otherwise the sun moves like the hour hand of a clock. Nobody would ever know what the sun is doing because you wouldn't look at it, right? But with time lapse, you can see exactly what's happening, but you have to be at the right point of view, and the point of view is on the mountain. And I'm going to show you this time lapse video, a series of time lapse videos shot from the summit or near the summit of mountains. And you can see exactly what's going on. Okay, here we go. There's the shadow on top of the clouds. And then it fades, it goes to the end, and it fades out. You see the shadow just kind of fade? That's because it's getting dark now. And especially on that side, further from the sun, it's getting darker quicker than it is back, obviously closer to the sun. The sun would be a little higher. But that's it. No more shadow. Here's another one. Going out, the shadow is on top of the clouds. Now, let that go out and that'll fade too. But you can see it. It's the end of the night. There are no time-lapse videos except like this, that at sunset, the shadow stretches out on top of the clouds. Or if there's no clouds, it's on top of the ground. But never is it at an angle that can cast upward onto clouds above the mountain, like actually cast the shadow of the mountain onto clouds above. You don't see that angle. The angle is always cast down on top of the clouds, and then it fades. That's it, as this side view shows. Okay, so here it goes. Where's the sun now? Clearly, it's above the mountain. Right? That's what would cast a shadow down on the clouds. It has to be above, right? Okay. Where is it now? Still above the mountain and above the clouds. How about now? Same thing. All the way out. It never changes. Okay? So at what point is it going to cast a shadow up onto the underside of clouds? There is no point. It doesn't ever get to that. The sun goes away, and it lowers due to perspective, right? As I showed in this little graphic, move the sun away, and it lowers. Visually lowers, but look at the line it's on. The line is parallel to the ground, and it's always higher than the mountains or the clouds. So the shadow is always cast downward. Okay, so what the time lapse that we see at sunset is a shadow that stretches out, stretches out, stretches out, and fades. If it were the sun going below the curvature, and if that were creating the shadow, and it were actually casting a shadow up onto clouds above, it would look like this. It would go down, and now the shadow would start far from the mountain on the clouds above, on the underside of clouds above the mountain and would draw back toward the mountain. That's what it would look like. Yet we don't see that. That's not reality. So I'm using this time lapse. So the sun goes out. Clearly, this is produced by a direct line to the sun. The geometry is like this, right? Just how it shows from the side here. And it goes all the way out. Now, the geometry, the line would have to shift from slightly above horizontal to now going below horizontal and pointing upward. And now, as the sun goes down, the shadow would draw back like this. And clearly, I kept the light in the scene, but it would get darker. And it would get dark. There's no time for a shadow to draw back like that. There is no time-lapse footage like this. Sunsets look like this. And sunrises look like this. The shadow's long, and then it draws back to the mountain. Now the opposite would be true on a ball earth for sunrise. Okay, but before I go on, I need to address this clip because you see this dropping down. I know there's some ball earther out there going to say, look, p-brane, that's the shadow of the earth. That's the curvature of the earth right there. Look, in my time-lapse of the sun video, I showed that the sunlight follows the sun. As the sun goes away, the sunlight follows it and recedes because indirect light doesn't go forever. Like when you look in these tunnel pictures I have here. Light doesn't go forever, right? So if that light source keeps going further away, the shadow's going to move back, or it's not, I don't know that you would call it a shadow, I guess, but it's just light. Just will not go forever. This is a whole different subject to talk about how the properties of light and how light works and stimulates the molecules in the atmosphere and produces the light that we see, right? But the sun moves away, and same as when the sun is approaching, the light comes before it. The molecules or whatever, the atmosphere lights up. And so you see this dropping down, and you might think, oh, that's the curvature of the earth, p-brane, that's the shadow of the earth. No, actually, remember the sky angles downward. You see that? That's just the light pushing away. And as the light goes away, the darkness, which is being overshadowed by the light, is getting further away, right? Because the light is overpowering it, and the light comes down because that's perspective. That's how the clouds come down, right? In all these pictures, this is why the shadow appears to be angled up and all that. It's just perspective. So I just wanted to dispatch that. All right, let's get back to this. Sunrise, the shadow would be cast up on the clouds above and stretch out away from the mountain. Then go down to the clouds below the peak of the mountain and draw back. Again, this is all fictitious. This doesn't happen. And all the time lapse proves that. What we see is the shadow is cast on the tops of the clouds, the direct sunlight. Okay, so they look at these photos, and again, a photo can't tell you anything compared to time lapse. Are you kidding? It's like going to go take a look at the sun, a picture of the sun, and make some declaration. When you have time lapse that shows you, wow, the sun is moving over the earth. Well, here you can see the shadow is stretching out on top of the clouds. So then how do you explain these photos? Well, it's just perspective. This one that Bob, the science guy, came out and claimed that, well, let's hear what in his own words.
Now, most people that would look at this photograph would realize...
Oh, nice science work there, Bob. Yeah, let's take a poll. What does everybody think of this picture? Nice appeal to consensus logical fallacy there, Bob. Good science, too.
That in order for the mountain to cast that shadow on the clouds above it, the sun had to be coming from an angle or an altitude lower than the peak of the mountain. This is not something that really needs to be explained most of the time. It's rather self-evident. Okay, so he just claimed that the sun is lower than the mountain, casting a shadow upwards onto clouds above the mountain. Would you say that with these streetlights? No. How about these telephone poles or whatever? Would you say it with those?
they're going down to the ground and they look like they're coming up as they come towards you. No, that's perspective. But this guy, who's a self-proclaimed expert in perspective and some kind of science guy, he also claims that the reason the clouds go down to the ground, appear to go down to the ground, is not perspective, but they're following the curvature. So again, are these streetlights following the curvature? No, that's perspective. Okay, so how do you explain some of these with like the shadow detached, which you can create that shadow with a light below the mountain. You can create a shadow like that, and they've used this. Oh, look, this is clearly, you can't produce this with a higher light source. Well, I showed that in my experiment that Bob called me a fraud on. I showed that I can catch that shadow. I did, right? But that's beside the point. It's really a moot point because the shadow is always cast on top of the clouds because the sun is always higher than the mountains and the clouds. But there are circumstances where you see a shadow reflected from a higher sun than the mountains, a higher light source. You can see a reflection. I took these pictures, right? Here's 12 o'clock noon. Where's the shadow? It's on the ceiling. It's over these cabinets, okay? And over this stack of stuff here, there's a shadow cast on the ceiling. The sun is straight up overhead. It's noon. Okay, look at the ceiling fan. The shadow's cast on the ceiling. So that could explain some of these things, but like I said, it's a moot point because the proof is in the time lapse. Just go up to the top of the mountain, the perfect viewing angle, where, as opposed to being 60 miles away on the ground like this picture and then making some declaration, here you actually can see the shadow growing. And the shadow is being cast downward, either onto the clouds below or onto the ground. And it is only produced by a sun higher than the mountain and going away. And that's it. This is done. Debunked. These pictures are debunked. Okay, so then this is either perspective, and here you have the two views of the mountain looking away from the mountain and on the ground with the shadow coming towards you. Here the shadow's going away, shadow coming towards you, and like these railroad tracks can just be a perspective illusion, or it's ambient light or some reflection, like this. That does happen. Here's a picture of a mountain, and you can see the glare off of the snow. Now, most of these pictures that I see with the detached shadow like that are white, snow-covered mountain. It's usually like Mount Rainier, but it's snow-covered, white. And so, yeah, I guess it could reflect. But again, I have to defer to the time lapse. As we see in time lapse, it's dark. By the time this shadow stretches out at sunset, it's dark. There's no time. It's not going to go up under any clouds and then draw back. And nobody's ever seen that. There's no video of this ever. I put out a challenge. I said, show me one photo like this with the shadow cast underside of clouds from the peak of a mountain. Every mountain climber has a phone. Every phone's got a camera in it. Nobody's taken this picture because it doesn't exist. The earth is flat, folks. It's not a spinning ball. Or at least, the claim I could make is at least these photos are debunked. No ball earther, don't allow them to use this as any evidence because it's not true. Time lapse from the mountain shows you that the shadow is cast on top of the clouds, that the sun has to be higher than the mountain peak to do that at all times. That's the geometry. That's the direct rays. That's the direct angle from the sun. It's not indirect light. It's not ambient light. It's not a reflection. This is directly from the sun, and the shadow is cast down on top of the clouds. So anything that may look like that, oh, wow, look at that. The shadow is cast on the underside of the clouds. Wow, look at these streetlights. They're actually getting taller as they're coming toward me. Wow. Or they're actually getting smaller as they go away. Well, we know that's ridiculous. The clouds aren't stepping down and getting lower as they go away from you, and that's just perspective. These flower rows are not actually angled in towards one another. It's just perspective. And that's why these dummies call it flirspective, because they know this is the killer of their spinning ball Earth. We never were taught perspective in terms of how the visuals are for flat Earth. But once you learn flat Earth, you learn that perspective's everything, and this is why they make fun of it. This is why they don't teach it. Okay, these deep state gaslighting pirates have been using this ball Earth, spinning ball Earth, for many reasons. To make the Bible look silly, to control mankind. You know, money, 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 money. Always follow the money. Love of money is the root of all evil. Okay, these people are evil. And they're lying. And they have their stooges out here trying to fight the flat Earth. And they've used this photo. It's all over the internet, and they say, see, look at that. And the average person may look at that and agree with them. Yes, it looks like the shadow's going up from a sun lower than the mountain. That's what it looks like until you learn something about perspective. And now the clincher of clinchers, the debunker of debunkers, is the time lapse. The time lapse footage shows that the shadow is always cast downward onto the tops of clouds. Everything else, any snapshot pictures they show you, is either perspective, you know, your point of view that determines what things look like, or could be a reflection or ambient light, like I showed with all these photos with the shadow cast on the ceiling, and yet the sun was like 12 noon. And another thing could be, some of these could be faked. You know, hey, it's high stakes for these ball earthers and their 20 billion a year with NASA and all this fakery. So it's control, it's power, and it's money. Follow the money. So I know faked, I'm going to catch all kind of heat, but yeah, you can fake photos like this. Here, I'll show you a few. Is this real? Ooh, no, it's not. How about this one? Is this real? Nope. I made this one too. How about this one? You've all seen this picture. That's got to be real, right? Well, it's not quite the picture you've seen, but is that real? Nope, wrong again. So my point is that you can fake that, but that's not even necessary. I just wanted to show that because I happen to make these clips and I wanted to show you, right? All you got to know is this truth of the time lapse from the top of the mountain. That's it. The shadow at sunset stretches out, and at sunrise, it's already extended out long, and then it draws in. Okay, so one more time, I just want to make really clear what we would see if we were living on a spinning ball. First of all, see the sun angle right here to shine light on the clouds just above the mountain? Like in these pictures, right? They're claiming that these pictures are the sun being below the mountain, casting a shadow up on clouds above the mountain. Well, here you can see my sun is down here, off screen, but it's way down here. You see the angle that the sun's at. All right. That's problematic in itself. But so let me go ahead and play a little of this. And so what we're going to see is this would be the first shadow you would see in the morning. It would be cast on the undersides of clouds above the mountain, and it would start very close to the mountain. And then it would shrink out toward the horizon, still on the underside of clouds above the mountain. Okay? This is what we would have to see if it's a spinning ball. And all the time lapse we show, and that you can find any time lapse out there, it does not do this. Nobody's showing this. No pictures are taken like this. Okay, so now it would switch. So that was under the clouds above the mountain. Now it would switch to the tops of clouds below the mountain. Okay, as it draws back. Now this time lapse we do see with the sun higher than the peak of the mountain. This we see. The other is fictitious. We don't see it. Okay. Okay, so conversely, we would see the sun going down and the shadow being cast outward on the tops of clouds below the peak of the mountain. And then, and this is where we see it get dark. The shadows fade and it gets dark. But for their fantasy to be real, the undersides of clouds above the mountain would have to start to get the shadow cast on them, and the shadow would draw back toward the mountain. Again, we do not see this. Okay, I just wanted to reiterate this. And look at the angle the sun is at. The geometry does not work. The sun is always above the clouds. Okay. Let's go on. The sun's above the mountains at all times. This is strong evidence that we live on a flat, stationary plane. And though the stationary part corroborates this, the stationary part is that they say there's a 14-mile high bulge around the equator, yet we see water like glass. I mean, if there was a bulge of 14 miles high due to the current rotation, and they try to change that and say, it's not the current rotation. Yes, it is. That's your model. And your model says the Earth used to spin faster, right? About one rotation in 20 hours. I think that makes it about 1,250 miles per hour, whatever, close, at the equatorial rotational speed, and the bulge was bigger. And they said it has since slowed down and the bulge decreased. So it's inextricably linked, the two, the speed of rotation and the size of the bulge. So now we have a 14-mile high bulge with a flattening of the poles, right? And the 14-mile high bulge would be dirt, rock, ground, solid stuff. Yet the most fluid, if you will, water, most easily disturbed, most easily moved, would not be making up the predominance of the bulge? Seriously? I mean, this is just common sense. Of course the water would make up the 14 miles of the bulge, or it would make up the majority of the bulge would be water, because it'd be there first. It's the most easily moved. The several mile deep oceans that we have, that water would be flooding over, and it would look something like this. Okay, so that's just a corroborating bit of evidence I wanted to throw in. So you have the spinning ball is debunked, the curvature is debunked, and the sun going over the leading edge of a sphere or going down over the curvature, that's debunked with the mountain shadow time lapse. And the fact that we have no water piling up on the equator debunks rotation. I rest my case. Thank you so much, everybody. If you haven't already, pick up a shirt, pick up a mug. If you don't want to wear a shirt, buy a mug, or if there's something else in there that I haven't made of a certain print, you know, a certain design that I have, and maybe you want to pick up a wall painting or a whatever. They do prints, they do large banners and stuff. Anyway, let me know if there's something you want. A lot of them I already have made with the different designs, but go ahead and check it out, and I appreciate that. All right, everybody, debunked. It's debunked. These photos are debunked. We live on an immovable, stationary plane. All right. Thank you so much for watching. There's only one thing left to do. Let's kick the ball out of here. Take care.
The earth is flat.